Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, Glassdoor for CEOs, Lessons for the C-Suite, Here's a couple tips for you. We want to make today as interactive as possible, so go ahead and make sure that you go ahead and put your questions into the Q&A pane. We'll get to as many of those at the end of the session as possible. You will also be muted just to avoid some of that background noise, so make sure you leverage that Q&A box. I'm so excited to introduce our speaker today. We have with us Glenn Elliott from Reward Gateway. Glenn's the founder and CEO, and we are really excited about this. He has some great information about how to use and leverage Glassdoor as a CEO in particular. And then joining us from the Glassdoor side of the business is Ravi Edwards. He is the EMEA manager coming to you from London. So, with that, I am going to quickly mention if you have any questions or want to do some tweeting, make sure you use the hashtag Glassdoor. And now I'm going to go ahead and pass on over the controls to Ravi to kick things off.
Thank you, Shay. Right, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. As Shay mentioned, my name is Ravi Edwards. I am based in London, and I've been with Glassdoor now for coming up to 2.5 years. I've been in the space now for the best part of 10 years, believe it or not. And I'll actually just be speaking for roughly 15 to 20 minutes before handing things over to Glenn Elliott to tell you a little bit more. But what I want to do today is start with a quote from a CEO that you're probably all very familiar with, Jeff Bezos. He's the founder and CEO of Amazon.com, and I absolutely agree with this quote. You know, companies today can say that they're a great place to work and they can shout about it from the rooftops all they want, but ultimately, if your employees aren't happy, frankly, your brand will suffer. And that being said, your brand is absolutely what other people say about you when you're not in the room. You know, I would say that the room is very much the internet, but for the purpose of today's conversation, and at least my part, the room is Glassdoor. And with that in mind, I'd actually like to go ahead and just speak about 3 reasons that we believe CEOs should care about Glassdoor. And the first reason being, investors care about your company reputation. And secondly, engaged employees are much more productive. And finally, believe it or not, knowledgeable candidates are much easier to recruit. And, you know, we've all heard it before. It's who you know, not what you know. And we all turn to friends, family, and colleagues, and we ask them their opinion and experiences about a number of things. And if you actually don't know anyone within a company, you actually have the opportunity on Glassdoor to learn how people view their work environment and ultimately gain the insider insight that you would probably previously only get if you knew someone that has worked or currently works for that company. So let's actually go ahead and dive into these 3 reasons in a little bit more detail. And we'll broaden the conversation somewhat. You know, what exactly is an employer brand? And let's delve into the reasons that investors care about company reputation. The reality is powerful leaders drive organizations to succeed. You know, with strong management in place, employees thrive, and as a result, companies are much more successful. And the results I'm sharing here from a Harvard Business School study, and they highlight that well-led companies show a 900% stock price growth over 10 years, compared to poorly led companies that show only 74% growth. And 15 to 20% of the variance in a company's performance actually comes down to leadership. And here's a rhetorical question for you, well, a couple. Did you know employees are actually rating your organization and your management team on Glassdoor? Did you know investors are actually taking notice? Whether they actually decide to invest or not may come down to how well you manage your company reputation and your employer brand. And in turn, company feedback in the form of anonymous reviews actually helps leaders spotlight trends and issues that need to be addressed, helping to improve the overall organization. And employers today are actually starting to realize that there is an ROI behind engaged employees. You know, according to the Workplace Research Foundation, highly engaged employees are 38% more likely to have an above average productivity. And this engagement tends to actually have a ripple effect. Ultimately, the message here is boosting employee satisfaction is absolutely worth the investment. And in a recent Glassdoor study, we actually looked at reviews that were left by nearly 250,000 users who contributed both a company review and a salary report. And the goal was to try and answer the questions, does money buy work happiness? And what factors matter most to overall satisfaction? And what we found is salary does have a statistically significant impact on job satisfaction. It's actually really small. A 10% boost in salary leads to a 1 unit increase in satisfaction, say on a 0 to 100 scale. Now, in other words, if an employee who was making, say, 70K a year was given a raise to, say, 77K, their satisfaction would move from, say, 78 to 79, which would be very difficult to detect on a Glassdoor 5-point scale. Now, our data actually shows as well that there is a diminishing return on happiness for every 1K in earnings. Now, this ultimately poses the question, where does pay rank compared to other drivers? And even when we statistically control for factors like, say, gender, education, user experience, job title, employer size, industry, location, employee status even, salary actually is not at the top of the list. In fact, it's towards the bottom. Now, the most important factors influencing satisfaction are culture and values, career advancement opportunities, and opinion of senior leadership. Work-life balance, compensation and benefits, and business outlook are actually far less influential. Now, according to a Glassdoor economic research study, culture, values, opportunities, and senior leadership matter more to employee satisfaction, which directly impacts retention. And as you look at how else to engage and deepen the relationship with your employees, flashy new benefits may seem like all the rage, but we took a look at the benefits and that have the biggest impact on retention, and these are ultimately the results. Now, here are 2 more interesting stats that came from the Glassdoor site surveys. Now, you're probably thinking, well, duh, Ravi, this is obvious. Who would want to actually work for a company that doesn't embrace transparency and hides what's it like to work there? 62% of Glassdoor members actually agree that their perception of a company improves after seeing an employer respond to a review. And this number actually increases if the response comes from someone in senior leadership, for example, a CEO, like Glenn. Now, with that in mind, we encourage employers to obviously use Glassdoor to build their brand, respond to reviews, and join the conversation. As the saying goes, brand or be branded. It's important to follow up on feedback and crucially fix any problems or challenges that you may not have been aware of. Ultimately, responding to reviews on Glassdoor shows that you care, and it positively influences candidates' research in your organization. It's not just the negative reviews either that you should address. Also look at the positive reviews that highlight what you're doing well, what you could and should be doing more of as a company. And the final reason that I want to touch upon, just briefly, is, it's really obvious to be fair, I feel quite embarrassed saying this, but knowledgeable candidates are a lot easier to recruit, believe it or not. If you're not paying attention to your Glassdoor reviews and ratings, the chances are you're falling way behind the competition. Don't let the top candidates abandon your profile and head to your competitors. Add your perspective to reviews, update your Glassdoor profile, and share updates on your culture and the work environment. So just in summary, and this is really brief for me, the 3 reasons why CEOs cannot ignore Glassdoor are, firstly, investors care about company reputation. As an employer, you should know what's being said about your company. Remember the quote from the start from Jeff Bezos. Your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. And as I said, that room's the internet. For the purpose of today's chat, it's Glassdoor. And the second reason, engaged employees are much more productive. Now, use Glassdoor to help build your brand, respond to reviews, and join that conversation. As I said before, the saying is brand or be branded. And then the final reason, again, it's the most obvious one, knowledgeable job candidates are so much easier to recruit. Use Glassdoor to analyze the competition, target ideal fit job seekers, and win the war for talent. Give candidates the best opportunity to opt themselves in or out of your hiring process by just giving them some insight to make an informed and accurate decision on whether or not you are their employer of choice. So that's actually it from me for the moment. Now what I want to do is, without further ado, hand the floor over to Glenn Elliott. He's the founder and CEO of Reward Gateway. So I'm just going to hand things over to Glenn right now, and he can go ahead and tell you more.
Thank you. Just waiting for the handover. So hi there, everyone. It's Glenn Elliott here. I'm CEO and founder at Reward Gateway. So I'm currently in London today, but I'm normally based between London and Boston. And I wanted to talk to you about how I've learned Glassdoor can be much more powerful than I even thought, maybe that Ravi said earlier on. So firstly, the Reward Gateway is an HR technology company. We're 10 years old, and we've got 330 staff. We're geographically quite dispersed, so I've got about 100 staff here in the UK, 150 over in Bulgaria, 50 in Australia, 10 in America, and a few also in Macedonia. So that's interesting from a culture perspective and an employer brand perspective, because we've got several cultures and several employer brands to kind of try and glue together. Our mission is to make the world a happier place to work, and we do that by providing a technology product which allows an employer to glue together their employee recognition, their culture and values, their CEO's communication, their employee benefits all into one place. And we work for lots of companies that you would know, people like NASDAQ, AOL, Yahoo, Caterpillar, Cummins, lots and lots of big brands. Our largest client in the States is Comcast. Our largest client in the UK, I think, is McDonald's. We're launching for Tesco's in the UK on Monday. So lots and lots of big companies we work for, and lots of small ones too. And kind of key to how we think about ourselves is if we want to help our clients to make the world a happier place to work, we kind of need to do that here first at Reward Gateway too. And an awful lot of what we build into our products and services is what we've learned by building a highly engaged culture here at the office. So when I think about Glassdoor, we've been an engaged Glassdoor employer for several years. I believed in the value of Glassdoor quite quickly and thought it was a valuable place to read what our employees were thinking. So we did all the things that Glassdoor would ask us to do, and we kept a good profile together, and we populated it with more content and lots of pictures, and we read all reviews quickly. So I set up my notifications, and as soon as any review came in, I would read it immediately and discuss it with the leadership team. But the thing that we weren't doing was replying to Glassdoor reviews, and that was actually for several reasons. I'd kind of got fixated on it being quite hard to reply to Glassdoor reviews, and I struggled a lot with thinking about what tone of voice to use and how to address concerns that were brought up. And I really struggled because of thinking of it as a public review website. And the journey I've been on in the last few months has really been about changing my attitude to responding to reviews in particular. For some time we've encouraged the use of Glassdoor, so we have a short URL called rg.co/Glassdoor, which we promote internally in lots of places, making it easy for our staff to find our Glassdoor review. We run our own employee engagement hub, obviously on our own technology, and we have banner advertising on there saying, "Please review us on please leave an honest review on Glassdoor of your experience of RG." And we even have our HR system, Bamboo HR, set up so that on your anniversary every year, Bamboo emails you a congratulations on your anniversary, and it mentions there, if you haven't done a review of us on Glassdoor, please do so, your opinion counts. So we've always done those things, but I've still kind of always been curious about how to really get more of our staff to really engage. And I think this is so important because public reviews, social media and public reviews, they have really changed the way that people buy and choose everything, even their employers. So I picked this up from one of the Glassdoor presentations, actually, some research by Innabarro last year, suggesting that job seekers use on average 18 sources before applying for a job and look at 7 to 8 reviews where they can find them. Just very, very different world to 10 or 15 years ago, when the employer held all the cards, held all the information, and was running kind of big careers assessment centres looking at the best candidates. But whilst thinking about your candidate profile and who applies for jobs with you is valuable, I actually think it's missing the point in terms of really the biggest value for CEOs. Because it's not just potential candidates who are looking at your Glassdoor profile. There are two other key audiences. Ravi mentioned one of them earlier on, and there's another one as well. And it's incredibly true that your reputation is key to all parts of your business. So this is another Glassdoor slide. 63% of customers refuse to buy products and services they don't trust, and 80% of customers positively choose products from companies they trust. And whilst these stats are from B2C, I don't think of our business, which sells to HR, I don't really think of it as B2B, because we had a realization several years ago that it's always a person that buys our product. Whilst it's a business purchase and a business sale, it's always a human at the other end of the transaction that goes out of her way to get budget, assign budget, and choose us over our competitors to put us in place. And that person's making a human judgment call on whether it's worth the risk to her and her career to do that. So I think it's really, really important that you think about that. And I kind of think of this, Glassdoor is your company laid bare for the world. So not just candidates, but also customers. Whenever I'm researching a supplier now, a technology supplier, so I've recently bought some add-ons for our Salesforce implementation, I always look at the vendor's Glassdoor profile, because it's amazing what truth is leaked onto Glassdoor. So I found out that vendors I was choosing, some of their staff think they haven't got enough resources in testing, or they might tell you that their products aren't as good as they say they are. And it gives you some really interesting diligence points to follow up with sales or follow up with their service team. And I found increasingly that customers are using Glassdoor to research companies, not just employees. This guy is Chris Busby, who is partner at Greyhill Partners over in Boston. They're the private equity firm which owns Reward Gateway. They bought us last year for just over $200 million. And I knew that Chris Busby had been all through our Glassdoor profile as part of the bidding process to buy Reward Gateway. And I asked him last week, was that unique, or do you do that often? And this was his quote. He said that they research Glassdoor for every company we are seriously looking to invest in. It gives us a sense of company culture, management, leadership style, and even areas of potential underinvestment. So that, Glassdoor is your company laid bare, no filter, is really, really important for investors too. But even though engaging with Glassdoor is important if you want to think about how you appear to customers and your current investor or potential investors in the future, it's still missing the point. There's still an even greater point for CEOs, C-suite, C-level, or your leadership team. Because actually, I think the most powerful audience for Glassdoor, it might actually be your leadership team themselves. And I'm going to spend the rest of the day really talking about that. If you talk to CEOs and say, what is Glassdoor? Is it a great recruitment website that shows the company off and gets talented job applicants, or could it be? That sounds good. I'd like that. I'd sign up for that. We're in a war for talent like everybody else, and I think that would be a really good goal. But if someone said, but would you also like a rock-solid business where issues that impact your business's performance are fixed and all of your management is informed? I'd be like, yeah, that's even better. I want both of those things. And I think Glassdoor's got a role to play in both, because I think Glassdoor can really help your leadership team to connect with your people that are on the front line of your business, to understand your business in maybe more detail than they do, and to therefore act and improve. Whenever I meet other CEOs or C-suite or C-level people, I've never met anybody who said they wanted to be distant from their business. But we do get distant from our business because our businesses get big, and there's only so many ways you can connect. And also layers of management do tend to filter information from you, and it can be really hard. And I think the real value for me has come from using Glassdoor to power your business to a better place, to power mine to a better place. It gives you the chance to really listen to what your staff are saying, change where you want to make a change, or educate where there's a misunderstanding, and to create a real culture of trust and honest conversation. So whilst everything within the Glassdoor part of this presentation is completely true, and there were 3 great reasons there why CEOs should engage in Glassdoor, this for me is the 4th, and for me personally is the most important one. And it's why I think, maybe controversially, that reading and answering Glassdoor reviews is actually a C-suite job. It's not an HR job, and it's not a recruitment job. And I did originally think this was a recruitment department's job, and I was under some pressure a few months ago from our head of PR and head of recruitment to start responding to Glassdoor reviews. We hadn't responded to a single review in 3 years. And I said to Chris Gannon, who's our director of talent, isn't this your job? I mean, isn't Glassdoor's a careers website? It's a recruitment website, isn't it? So why have I got to do it? You know, shouldn't it be you? And he said to me, no, Glenn, you've got it wrong again. You know, you need to see what people are saying, and they want to hear your view from you, the CEO. And now that I've engaged with it, I can see that they're completely right. There's this interesting quote from Peter Thiel, who was co-founder and CEO of PayPal for a while, and he said this in an interview in the Washington Post. He said, as CEO, you are somehow both the total insider and the total outsider at the same time. In some ways, you're at the center of your organization. In other contexts, you're the last person to know anything. And I can empathize with that, definitely. In researching today's webinar, I've also met Claire Liu, who is CEO of Know Your Business, Know Your Company, down in Chicago. And Claire's business, she provides a non-anonymous feedback tool, and she's got some really strong and interesting views about feedback. But this particular post I pulled off LinkedIn, and she said, when you're the boss, there's one important thing you need to remember. You're the boss. That means whether you like it or not, there's an inherent power dynamic in every interaction you have with your employees. You're the last person, you're the person your employee is least willing to go to about a problem. You're the last person your employee wants to share bad news with. Your offhand suggestion, which feels so casual to you, can be interpreted as a mandate, and your critique, whilst well-intentioned, can feel like a death blow to an employee. You're always getting a version of the truth, and every statement you make and action you take is heightened. This is only human nature. People don't bite the hand that feeds them. They give in. You give those in charge the benefit of the doubt. And Claire and I don't have exactly the same opinion on feedback. She's strongly against anonymous feedback, whereas actually I think anonymous feedback has a role. But I think everything she said in that post I definitely agree with. And what I've learned in the last few months is being seen to listen to feedback is actually the most powerful way to encourage more feedback, because people just really want to be heard. I met Stuart Butterfield from Slack in February at a conference in San Francisco, and he said he talked a lot about the culture at Slack, and he left me with this quote which stuck in my mind, which is, the building always knows the truth. I think it's interesting sometimes when you're on a board or a leadership team, you're often wrestling with problems that you think that the organisation doesn't know the answer to, and then mysteriously you can later find out that actually everyone knew the answer other than you. So if you're wondering if a certain product is selling well enough or it's got problems, actually the sales team know really well what's going on with that product. So connecting or building better connections between the top and the front line of your organisation, I think is really key. And I kind of feel that this is important for leadership teams, and I kind of feel that they know this. We talk a lot about the employee engagement gap, often quoting these stats from the Harvard Business Review study last year, where 71% of executives ranked employee engagement as very important to their business, to their organization, but only 24% of the same executives said their employees were highly engaged. And I've learned that in the last few months that using Glassdoor well can really help with your employee engagement. So if we think about wanting our employees to speak up, to talk to us, to talk to the leadership team. So I guess I'm kind of doing something quite different there. I'm suggesting that Glassdoor is more than about speaking out to the world, but also about speaking up internally. When I think about what the barriers are, and I've worked hard to create an open culture at Reward Gateway, and many people would say we've got an amazing open culture. but I know that still many people find it difficult to speak up. When I think about what those barriers are, I think they are different whether the feedback you're asking for is named and identifiable to the person, or whether it's anonymous. So when it's named, people often are frightened. They might be embarrassed that their feedback is silly or is wrong. They fear rejection if they're told that their feedback is not being adopted, and they may even feel the consequences in some organisations, frightened by what would happen if they give feedback. Anonymous feedback overcomes some of those barriers, but it also falls down when people are too busy. They might not have trust in anonymity, or maybe they just don't really care about what you're asking them about. But something which both anonymous and named feedback both have in common is a barrier about futility. So often when you ask people, did you give us that feedback we asked for? Did you answer that survey? Did you answer that questionnaire? Often the answer is, oh, I didn't, because I just didn't think anyone would read it. Or I did it last year, nothing seemed to change. I told you what I thought about whatever project it was some time ago and didn't hear anything back. It's the futility. They feel that no one's listening. And this is some data I actually got from Claire Liu at Know Your Company. She quotes a Cornell National Social Survey from Cornell University, where they found that futility was more common than fear as the reason for employees not speaking up to their managers. So in that survey, 26% of respondents said they didn't reply to surveys internally because there was no point, whereas only 20% said they were frightened of the consequences of making their voice known. So responding to Glassdoor reviews is key to addressing that futility piece, because you have to be seen to listen. It's more important to be seen to listen than just to listen by itself. But unlike Claire, whilst I agree with many things that she talks about, and I also believe that anonymous feedback does have a role in an organisation. I'd love to run a business where we had such an open culture, everyone had the courage to speak up and talk openly about what their thoughts were on things. But I accept that we're on a journey to that, and we're not there yet. And it reminded me of this Oscar Wilde quote, "Give a man a mask and he will tell you the truth," because whatever your culture's like, if someone's anonymous, their guard is down on several things. And whatever we think about anonymous versus non-anonymous or named feedback, this is something I know from my personal experience. When we encourage and enable anonymous feedback, we do hear voices that we would not otherwise hear. And as CEO of our business, I want to hear all the voices. I might not agree with all of them, and I might not act on all of them, or even on many of them, but I want to hear them because I want them to become part of my thinking and part of our organisational conscience. I think it's really important. So, like I say, in a perfect world, identified feedback would be easy and everyone would do it. But I think the world's not perfect. I think you have to earn your employees' trust. You can't expect to demand it. And I think using Glassdoor in the way that I've now learned is better. So by responding in detail, rapidly, to every single review, is a great way to start to build trust and demonstrate that by listening that you're different to other organisations maybe that people have worked into where they've been frightened to give feedback or they've thought it was futile. So getting on to some practicalities. If you start using Glassdoor and promoting it internally and encouraging reviews and listening to them and replying, what will you hear? So you hear lots of things, but here are 4 of them. You learn about things that are broken in your product and business. And that's good, because you can get someone to fix them. You learn often about decisions that are misunderstood. So things that you've done as an organisation that people don't know why you've done them. And that's good as well, because you can correct that and you can make those decisions execute better. I was reading a blog post a few days ago about how many corporate restructures fail to deliver the outcome that was expected, and often it's because the message of why it's being done is lost by the time it gets done to the front line. So you can correct that. You can correct it within Glassdoor, and you can read things in Glassdoor that actually make you go off and do better communications internally. You will also learn what is valued by your staff. Glassdoor's got a really nice, system of asking what the pros are, what the cons are, and what advice to management is. Now that I've read and responded to 100 reviews, I've realised it's actually a really good format. It's a really good format because even your most positive review, you get some suggestions for things that you could do differently. And people are going to write bad things about your business. No business is perfect. and no relationship with you can't have every single relationship with your staff work perfectly. So they're going to write bad things that other people will see, and you can show humility, understanding, and where appropriate, you can set out your side of the story. So let's think about responding. So we know from Glassdoor's own research that 62% of people say their perception of a company improves after seeing an employer respond to a review. And I know from this quote, which I've used a million times from Maya Angelou, that this is really important when you think about how you review. She says, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And when you're responding to any review on Glassdoor, you've got to think about how are you leaving people? How will they feel? How will other people feel when they read your answer? I was talking to Richard, our Chief Product Officer, just a few weeks ago, and he'd been doing a big rash of interviews for a whole load of new product manager jobs. And he said to me, Glenn, he said, you won't believe it, I've done a lot of interviews this week, and 4 out of 5 candidates specifically mentioned, unprompted, how impressed they were that our CEO personally responded to Glassdoor reviews in depth. It's 4 out of 5. It was 10 interviews in a week, which is incredible. I was surprised. So every review you get is going to be unique, but there are 6 kind of broad types that I wanted to prepare you for. The first is, it's a nice review. It's all smiles. It's someone who's really happy with the job, they love it, they love the company. These are nice. They don't really move you forward, though. They're not actually, they're nice reviews. You get them and oh, that's nice, but they don't really give you information that can move your business forward. So you're going to get lots of these, which is good. You're going to get these. They're nice reviews. They're generally pretty happy. They might be highly engaged, but they're going to point out somewhere to something that needs to be improved around pay, benefits, training. Now, when you're thinking about these, none of us are going to get a whole load of Glassdoor reviews saying that everyone thinks pay is amazing. I've never ever seen an employee survey of any type in any organisation where people were happy with pay. It just doesn't happen. Yeah. But these are really good reviews because they talk about how someone feels about being an employee. And we used this year. We radically improved our employee benefit package to our own staff. You know, we sell employee benefits to our clients, so you'd think we should be a beacon of excellence in it, and we should, and we weren't. And our staff taught us that, and they taught us it via Glassdoor. We addressed it, and if you look at our benefits reviews, if you compare April, May, June to the months before it, radical improvement. And it's a great example of where we've learned something on Glassdoor that we needed to act on. You're going to get some reviews that point out something that is product or service related, like this company doesn't invest enough in testing, or the products aren't as good as they say they are. And these are interesting ones. You've got to be really careful here because the person's not talking just about how they feel as an employee. They're talking about your product and service, and these can be really damaging if clients see them. But the important thing to do here is not to kind of shoot the review down or just to go into like how do I kind of steamroll over this or make it look like it's not true. The important thing here is to think about why did they say this? Because whilst it's kind of in everyone's interest to say I'd like more pay, I'd like better benefits, we need more training, generally people only give you reviews of this type when there's some element of truth. And the way to make your business better is actually to think less about how do I respond and think more about how do I understand and fix. And a great way to respond to this type of review is to thank the person for their feedback, to thank them for pointing that out, and to say that you're going to investigate and see if you need to do more, because that's what they're telling you. Sometimes you get just a terrible review that feels really off-beam. And sorry, I didn't get rid of my Hangout window. That's what happens when you forget to kill Google Hangouts. A terrible review that feels really off-beam, and you just don't recognise the company they're talking about. These are actually easier to answer than you think, and I think a lot of CEOs, a lot of people responding worry about these. I'm going to show you a great example from Katie at HubSpot and how she deals with these ones. And sometimes you're going to get a terrible review where you can completely see the person's point and you realise that your company has failed them and you've treated them badly. And you know what? These are easy. You just say you're sorry. You apologise. sometimes you recognize the issue. You know that you just closed the division, or you just shut down a product, or you know that you did something terrible organization, like you hired a 5-person sales team and 3 months later decided you didn't need it in that country and you needed it somewhere else. I mean, unless you're running a very, very small organization, your organization is going to do some bad things sometimes. And when it does, you just need to say you're sorry. The number 5 is so easy to deal with if you've got humility. It's so easy. And the 6th type is a positive and balanced review from a highly engaged employee, but who's misunderstood some things. And I had one of these recently, actually, and it was actually one of the hardest reviews to answer, because it was in depth, it covered loads of different materials, it was clearly from an employee who was super engaged and loved their job, but they brought up some negatives and some things that they thought should change that actually I just didn't think were right, and they were based on incorrect information. And I needed to think very carefully about how can I deal with this review without damaging the engagement of this highly engaged member of staff who clearly loved their job and was clearly doing fantastic things for us. So in this particular review that I was dealing with, someone thought that we had high staff turnover in some parts of our business. And my instinct was that we just didn't. I think we've been through a period of the last 6 months of our lowest staff turnover we've had for years. But I didn't want to just say you're wrong, because that doesn't seem right. So what I actually wrote was that I didn't recognise the turnover that they were thinking about, and that I wasn't sure where they were which part of the business they were thinking about. So I actually commissioned HR to give us a complete review of all of our staff turnover around the business, and I committed to publishing it internally on our intranet. So I avoided saying you're wrong and said let's have a look at it together and let's look at the information, and that was a much better way of dealing with that person. When you're thinking about responding, this is really important. I think there is no shortcut to authenticity. So personally, I don't use any sort of template. I don't have a template I can cut and paste from. I write every single response from a blank sheet. Because I think when you think about what you're trying to do here, you're trying to create a bond between your frontline staff and the leadership and C-level, C-suite of your company. And if you keep using the same words in the same order that you've used in other reviews, people can spot it a mile off. My learnings from the last 10 years is staff can spot inauthenticity very, very quickly. So there are no shortcuts. Yeah? If you want to send a Christmas card to all your staff, you need to write them out yourself. I think it's really important. Another point is that reviews from past employees count as much as reviews from current employees. Their future words affect your reputation as both a supplier, a brand, as an employer. And all of us, unless you're very, very small or very, very young in a company, all of us will have people who've left where things didn't work out and they had to leave. But what you want to think about is you want those people to be going around as an advocate for your business still. They might have had a disappointing time, they might have not been successful in their career with you, but you don't want them going around really bad-mouthing each other people. And we're in sales to HR and sales and service to HR in B2B. And when I think about many of our leavers over the last 10 years, many of them have remained in B2B, and quite a lot of them have remained in HR. So it's important. They're going to bump into and meet potential clients and clients of ours. And however bad their experience was when they were with us, and it will be bad sometimes, some things don't work out, I want them to leave thinking that we were as respectful to them on the exit as we were when we hired them. And part of that actually is responding to their Glassdoor review. So my 5 top tips are these. Firstly, be fast. This is an on-demand society, and nothing impresses your people more than responding to their Glassdoor reviews quickly, and nothing encourages them more either. So I announced a 1-day SLA, 1 day. So as soon as a Glassdoor review comes in, I have 23 hours and 59 minutes and counting to get my response out. And since I announced that a couple of months ago, I've hit it every time apart from once, and that was the most recent time when I had that quite slightly more complex review to do, and it hit me at a difficult couple of days as well. So it took me more than a day. So I've failed it once. I've hit it every other time. So I have my Glassdoor notifications set up to send to my personal email account, and I have that set up to go to my Apple Watch. So and it's set as a VIP. So I get a note on my Apple Watch as soon as we get one, and then I move myself. Second thing is be kind. Always think about being kind in your review, whatever somebody says. the world is watching. When you send that response back, it's going to get emailed by Glassdoor to the person who wrote the review, but it's also going to get seen by everyone who looks at your Glassdoor profile in the future. The world is watching. The real thing that helped me to craft better responses was to forget that this was a review I was responding to and instead just think about the person. So when I read that text, I just forget that it's a public review website, I forget it's on the internet, and I just imagine someone, one of my staff, or one of my recent leavers, if it's a leaver, has sent me a personal email and these are their thoughts. And when I do that, I find it much easier to write a response. Because Glassdoor reviews are anonymous, but they don't have to be faceless. And I think this is the single key thing that that really helped me with my review responses. You should, though, resist every temptation to try and figure out who left a review, and I can't stress this enough. It's human nature sometimes when you get feedback that's anonymous to try and figure out from what they said, which department they're in, who it is, you know, who said that, if it's from an ex-employee, who's just left, and you're racking your brain. Don't do it. Firstly, it just consumes your energy when you should be thinking about looking for the truth in the review and how can I improve my business with this feedback. And secondly, whenever I've done it, I've invariably found out later on that I was wrong. So put your detective hat and glasses away and do not think about it. I think you should answer every single review without fail and without hesitation. And I do know of some highly engaged Glassdoor employers who don't do this. They think that if it's a real stinker or something that they think isn't really true, they just ignore it. But I don't think that's the right thing to do. I think if a review really stinks, even if you suspect its integrity, even if you think, which often we all do, a competitor's written this, and my evidence is it's very, very rare, if at all, that happens. You must reply. You never, ever want to leave a bad review unanswered. This is a great example. It's Katie Burke. She's the VP of Culture and Experience at HubSpot in Boston. They're good friends of ours, and we use them in our marketing ourselves. She had a real stinker of a review back on the 16th of April. You can see it there on their profile for the world to see. And this person did not have a single good word to say about HubSpot. It was a true stinker in detail. But look at Katie's response. Ouch. Not a fun one to read at all, and it's not reflective of my experience at HubSpot, or that of many of our employees. Typically, I would dive into specifics, but given the nature of this review and your experience, I'm happy to connect offline if you'd like to discuss. Just shoot me an email, and I'm happy to meet in person or do a phone call to hear your point of view and hear what we could have done better. If she hadn't responded like that, as a reader, I'd be left reading this terrible review thinking, there's got to be some truth in that. And instead, the last thing I read is Katie's response, and I'm left thinking she's got great humility, they're humble, she's listened, she's dealt with it sensitively, she hasn't got into an argument with the person, and she ends by saying, what could we have done better? Which is fantastic. So she leaves us in a much better place. But I think the really important thing is to listen with an open mind. We stop responding to Glassdoor reviews. My priority is not how do I answer or rebut this review, it's what can I learn about my business from this review, and therefore what can I choose to improve. And that's the real difference. On a practical sense, you'll get some really positive reviews that have a few cons to address as well, and I don't spend too much time wallowing in the comfort of the positives, so I maybe spend 10 to 20% of my reply time acknowledging and thanking them for the positive time they're having at Reward Gateway, but I spend most of my time discussing the improvement ideas, because that's what's going to move a business forward. And it reminds me of this quote, of a quote. I've just been finishing reading The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, and you know, he talks about how the bigger your organisation gets, sometimes you'll be stupefied by the terrible things that it does in your name. He talks about how founders feel responsible for everything their organisation does, and there's some good truth in that. And what I've found is there's very little smoke without fire. So even the most bitter or unfair reviews, you can almost always find something that's worth acting on that will improve your business. And I think that for me, that's the prize. It's a real prize. So where do you start? I think you can practice on your old reviews. It doesn't matter how old they are. Just be genuine and honest. I only started responding to our Glassdoor reviews a few months ago, so I had several years of them that were unanswered. And I just started to go through, and it's even easier now because there's a new feature in the Glassdoor employer admin panel that lets you view all the reviews that you haven't replied to, so it gets easier. So here's an example. We had a stinker from the 8th of October 2014. Waste of time, as a summary, from a former member of the sales team. Doesn't recommend working for us, negative outlook on the business, and disapproves of me. No pros to mention. Poor pay, no management, bullying atmosphere, almost cult-like, run by children, people have got no experience of either life, high staff turnover, one big joke. It was not a great review, and it was from 2 years ago. So you might think I would just ignore it, but I didn't want to because I know that people are going to see this in the future. So this is how I responded. Hi there, it's Glenn here. Being honest by saying I'm going through our Glassdoor archives to make sure that every review's got a response, and I found yours. I know it's from a couple of years ago, and you'd already left us by the time you wrote it, but I wanted to reply anyway. Things didn't work out for us, and I'm genuinely sorry about that. I read the other day that the true cost of a failed hire is 3 times the annual salary, and that's certainly true in sales where you were. Whilst I don't recognise the company you describe, although now we're in 2014, we did complete the investor change as planned, and it was for more money than we'd planned. And I genuinely hope that you've gone on to great things and now have a role that works for you. It doesn't benefit anyone when the working relationship breaks down. And although your review of your time here was very negative, I'm grateful for your contribution to open communications. So you can respond to your stinkers from years ago and your good ones too. And I do think it's particularly important because it's really in 2 clicks in the Glassdoor interface. By clicking on the rating filter twice, you will show reviews for an employer in reverse rating order. So by looking at my stats, I can see that old negative reviews get seen more than old positive reviews. So I know that that's important. So I think ultimately, you've got the power to use Glassdoor to make your people feel heard and feel listened to, and you've also got the power to correct misunderstandings and improve communications. You've got the power. The key thing is to make changes and put things right where you choose to. So for me, Glassdoor, as well as everything that Ravi said in the first part of this webinar, it allows me to scale personal CEO contact across geographies and across hundreds and hundreds of staff. So that's kind of it from me, and I think we're going to have Shay back to deal with any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Glenn and Ravi. Such great info, great examples as well. I really appreciate that info. So we do have a couple questions. We have a couple minutes left. This one is for Glenn. Glenn, how do you suggest, what's the first thing we should really do if we want to get buy-in from the executive management and get them to start responding to Glassdoor reviews like you? How should we approach them first?
I think by just talking to them about how valuable the information is that you can get, and I think by telling them that it's okay to have feedback about things that we might choose to improve. I think you've got to create that culture, even in your leadership team, that they can have their division, their organisation hasn't got to be perfect. I wrote something recently called my user manual. I was inspired by the New York Times did an article about writing a user manual on what you expect from your staff. So I published mine on my blog, and I give it to all my direct reports. And one of the things it says is, I don't expect you to run a perfect organisation. In fact, if you told me your organisation was perfect, I just think you didn't have your eye on the ball and your standards were low. And I think if you have that culture of them being okay for them to be able to address, have and address issues, that's a starting point.
Great. This question is for Glenn, and then maybe have Ravi follow up. Glenn, you mentioned you have between 300 and 400 employees. How would you suggest we manage reviews in a company with thousands of employees? Would you still try to respond to every single one?
Yeah, it's funny. I tried to do some data actually, looking at how many reviews you get per 1,000 employees. In fact, maybe Glassdoor have this yourselves. I mean, we have 330 employees, and we promote Glassdoor internally, but we only get a review every couple of weeks. Yeah, maybe every week sometimes if we're lucky. Yeah, So it's quite easy. I look at organisations that've got 2, 3, 4,000 staff, and they're probably getting, 1 or maybe 2 reviews a week. So actually, I think you've got to be pretty large to find a real scaling issue. And I think if it's to the point where you can't do it, then clearly you need to put a team around it, and you need to. And I've seen some other Glassdoor webinars where the really large employers with 100,000 staff have got a team. But I think it's important that the ownership of that team has the ability to make changes and the ability to get the review seen by the right people. I think that's what's key.
Yeah, absolutely. I echo what Glenn just said there, Shay. I feel like some organizations, the bigger organizations that Glenn just referenced there, that have thousands of employees around the world, the strategy tends to be having regional or perhaps departmental heads respond to particular reviews. To Glenn's point, really getting that executive team or the C-suite involved. And we have some partners that work with us who, on a monthly or even a quarterly basis, they'll actually export their reviews and discuss it within their exec meetings and who should be responsible for responding to that review. So if it's a marketing focused review, perhaps the head of marketing, CMO or marketing director will respond to that review because it's, their business unit.
Perfect. This one's for Ravi. Ravi, do you have to be a Glassdoor client to respond to reviews?
In short, no. Again, I think Glenn just, waxed lyrical very eloquently about this. You don't need to be a Glassdoor client to respond, and you absolutely should respond. As I mentioned earlier, be involved in the conversation. Otherwise you're being branded, right? You do need to put across your perspective, and you can do that without being a client. It's really simple, just to actually sign up and get a free, it is very basic, but it is a free employer account that gives you basic access to responding to reviews, adding photos, updating your profile, things of that nature.
Perfect. Here's one for Glenn. Glenn, obviously your company started as a smaller company once upon a time. Was there any, you talked a lot about, people maybe not being as truthful if they were fearful that people would know who they were and who left the review. What do you recommend for companies that have, 20 to 50 employees? How do you recommend they encourage their employees to feel safe leaving a review?
Oh, that's a good question. I think when we promote Glassdoor, we always use really precise language. So we always say, we'd love you to leave an honest and real review on Glassdoor, and it's completely anonymous. So we never, ever, ever ask for a good review. It's a terrible thing to do. I've seen you can see organisations that have asked for good reviews because someone within hours of asking for them, someone will put onto Glassdoor, we were all asked to make good reviews. So you must never do that. It's a real no-no. So you've always got to stress that you want honest reviews, and I think you've got to explain to your workforce why you want them, because you want to hear their feedback and you want to continually make the business better and you want it to be part of the conversation. I think you leverage the fact that Glassdoor is anonymous, and I think most people are able to write a review. If your company is small, they will write the review in a way which doesn't identify themselves. Yeah. So if you've only got one product manager, they won't say, I'm a product manager. I've only had one example out of 100 where someone revealed themselves to me. Both by writing something in the review which meant I knew who it was, and also by saying to me, I've just written my Glassdoor review, Glenn. And it's funny, it made that review all the harder to respond to because I really wanted the anonymity. I respect it, and it makes it easier.
Great. Another last one for Glenn. Glenn, do you change your voice or your tone when you're responding to a positive review versus more of a negative one?
Not consciously. Maybe someone could analyze my responses online and tell me if I do. I try and respond in my personal tone of voice like I would talk. I try and do that in all my communications. So I just think about being honest and human and treating someone with respect. I think, someone's taken the time to stop what they're doing, probably done it from home, and contribute feedback to your company, which takes some effort. I mean, with 330 staff, we've only got 100 reviews, so some of our reviews are from people who've left us, some good reviews and some bad ones. So I don't know, my guess is maybe only 60 or 70 people out of 330 have reviewed us so far. And I know that some people say to me, "Oh, I've not reviewed us on Glassdoor, Glenn. I'm thinking about it, I'm working up to it," and some people plan it for ages. But I don't think I change my tone of voice. I think I try and be honest and I try and listen in all of them. And the truth is, actually, most reviews are a mix. So you might get a really great rating, but because of the way Glassdoor is structured, is in what are the pros, what are the cons, and what is advice to management. Two of those sections, cons and advice to management, are digging out feedback, things that could be changed or improved. So it's quite rare to get a review which is universally positive and has nothing else, no suggestions. So you've always got suggestions or cons to deal with, nearly always.
Great. And last one for Ravi, and then we'll wrap up. Ravi, you mentioned there was a way that you can kind of export information on reviews. Are there other analytics within Glassdoor that are offered to non-paying clients?
Yeah, absolutely. There's some basic analytics for non-paying clients. Just having some insight into the audience, researching you on Glassdoor, checking out your specific profile, and how that benchmarks and looks against some of your other talent competitors. So you can have some insight into that. With the pay profile, there is a plethora of analytics and data, and really that's where the power of Glassdoor lies, in my opinion, is really the insights, the analytics and data that you can get. But to Glenn's point earlier, right, you have to be seen to action the insights that you get from these reviews, right? So looking at the data, analyzing it, and being seen to action that, be it in terms of a response to an individual that's left a review, or who's no longer with the business, or someone that's left a review that's still with the business, right? And highlighted where there's room for improvement, or as I mentioned earlier at the start of the webinar, something that you're doing really, really well. I'm just amazed that Glenn shared that review from 2014. I was so curious. I actually logged in, Glenn, and had a look at that review myself. And although it was left 2 years ago, you've had 180 people look at that in the last 30 days, and that just speaks to the power of actually responding to a review that was left so long ago, because so many eyeballs have been on that in the last 30 days alone. Yeah,
it's amazing, isn't it? It's so important. People are watching. They're looking.
Great. One more just came in, and I think this is a great question, kind of for both of you, but we'll start with Glenn. Glenn, great to hear you speak about Glassdoor, such a useful tool for businesses and potential employees. Reward Gateway seems like such an amazing company with a great culture. Would you still believe in Glassdoor if your company didn't have such a positive score? Please explain.
Okay, it's a good question. I fundamentally believe that employee engagement and a good culture drives business results and business success. So I started Reward Gateway 10 years ago. We had no VC, no funding. We had 2 credit cards, and they weren't big credit cards either. And we built a $250 million business in 10 years on investing time, because we didn't have any money, on investing time in building great culture and employee engagement. So I do think Glassdoor is relevant if you haven't got that, because it will help you get it, and that will drive your business results. I think it's absolutely key. In fact, the worse your culture is, the more you should be into Glassdoor, listening about what's wrong with it.
Awesome. Okay, with that, we ended a couple seconds early. Thank you both so much. Really, really powerful stuff. I appreciate you being so transparent and honest about your views of Glassdoor, Glenn. To everybody out on the webinar, we will share a recording with you if you'd like to forward that on to any colleagues or friends. With that, we will wrap things up. Thank you so much, Ravi and Glenn. Everybody have a great rest of your day.
Great, thanks so much.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.